All right, let's dive right in. Welcome back to The Explainer. Today we are unpacking an absolutely unprecedented digital legal assessment. We're looking at what happened when 6 major artificial intelligence models were asked to independently analyze a single, highly controversial legal verdict. It's a fascinating case where the objective laws of physics literally collided head-on with the laws of the state, resulting in a 20-month prison sentence for a scientist. We're going to deconstruct the hard facts, look at a really unusual scientific defense, and break down the unified conclusions of these AI models based directly on our source documents.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll be hitting 5 key areas: the facts of the Chen Jingyuan case, his mind-bending physics defense, the missing legal elements, the procedural breakdown, and finally, the AI consensus. Let's get to it.
Part 1. The Chen Jingyuan case.
So meet Dr. Chen Jingyuan. He's a physicist, right? An expert in complex systems. But get this, his digital footprint on Twitter? Exactly 100. We're talking his total follower count and retweets over several years combined. Honestly, that's practically background noise. It's a tiny drop in the ocean. But somehow, according to our sources, that minuscule digital footprint got him a 20-month prison sentence. Yeah, 20 months.
Now, what do they actually charge him with? Picking quarrels and provoking trouble. If you follow this stuff, you know this is a classic pocket crime. It's this incredibly broad umbrella used to catch behaviors that just don't fit neatly anywhere else. But here is the critical thing. To legally make this charge stick in a digital context, the law dictates that the defendant's actions absolutely have to cause a serious disruption of public order. Keep that in mind.
Because look at what he was actually doing. He's a physics researcher just passively retweeting posts on a foreign platform. And what's the content? We're talking symbolic art, some academic opinions, even official U.S. Embassy posts. And the real-world disruption? The AI models looked at the court records, and there was literally zero documented evidence of disruption. No offline chaos, no protests, no economic damage, nothing. It's just wild to see the gap between passively tapping retweet and experiencing such a severe legal outcome.
Okay. Moving right along to Part 2, the physics defense. This is where it gets really interesting.
So Dr. Chen is sitting in a cell, and instead of a standard legal defense, he uses what he knows best: physics. He argues that social media platforms like Twitter operate as what's called scale-free networks. Basically, you have these massive hub nodes, think celebrities, influencers, or official media, and then you have millions of peripheral nodes with barely any connections at all. With under 100 followers, Dr. Chen scientifically established that he was the absolute textbook definition of a peripheral node.
And here is the absolute genius of his argument. The prosecution was essentially operating on this assumption that one retweet from a tiny account could cause some massive butterfly effect, total systemic chaos. But Dr. Chen brings in the math. He uses the Cohen critical threshold formula to prove the scientific reality. Scale-free networks are incredibly robust. They easily absorb minor perturbations. Mathematically speaking, it is physically impossible for a tiny peripheral node like his to trigger an avalanche of public disruption. No way, no how.
But wait, he doesn't stop at network topology. He pulls out the CAP theorem from computer science. Now, this theorem states that a distributed system can only give you 2 out of 3 guarantees at any given time: consistency, availability, and partition tolerance. And he uses this theorem to completely reframe the prosecution's definition of public order. He points out that in a massive distributed social network, you physically cannot have absolute static consistency without shutting the whole thing down. So what the prosecution was calling disorder or inconsistency, that's actually just a feature of a working network. It's how the system survives. To demand absolute consistency is basically demanding the network to break. It's not a crime, it's just science.
Which brings us to Part 3, missing elements of crime.
When the large language models analyzed the case files, they found a massive, glaring hole. 4 specific elements are legally required to prove this crime, and literally all 4 were missing from the prosecution's evidence. Did he fabricate facts? No. Was there widespread dissemination? No. Actual serious disruption? Nope. Subjective criminal intent? Completely absent.
So how did the court justify a guilty verdict without proving intent? We'll get ready for some serious logical gymnastics. They essentially asked, does a PhD prove criminal intent? The models highlighted that the court argued because Dr. Chen is highly educated, because he has a PhD, he quote-unquote should have known better. And boom, from that, they legally deduced a guilty mind.
But Dr. Chen turns that right back around on them. The prosecution is saying, you have a PhD, so you have criminal intent. And Dr. Chen says, actually, I have a PhD in complex systems, which means I know for a scientific fact that my actions as a peripheral node are completely harmless. If he mathematically knows he can't cause a disruption, how could he possibly have the intent to cause one? It's brilliant. He completely weaponized their own logic.
And let's briefly look at the actual content he retweeted, which the court deemed fake information. We're talking about a cartoon drawing of an umbrella girl, some subjective emotional expressions, academic essays, and official U.S. diplomatic posts. As the AI analysis points out, none of these are objectively falsifiable facts. You cannot scientifically or legally prove a cartoon or a philosophical opinion false in a way that makes it criminal rumor-mongering.
All right, let's look at Part 4, Procedural Justice Breakdown.
So the AI analysis tracked the timeline of events from our sources, and it's basically a domino effect of procedural failures. First, an allegedly warrantless search where he was coerced for passwords. Then, they hold a secret trial and block public access without a valid legal exemption. During that trial, Dr. Chen's attempts to present his scientific defense were repeatedly restricted and interrupted. And the appeal? A paper-only review. No formal hearing at all, even with massive disputes over the facts.
But here's the absolute kicker, the thing that really stood out to the AI models. Standard Law 101 says the burden of proof is entirely on the prosecution, right? Prove guilt. But the appellate court explicitly rejected his appeal because Dr. Chen failed to provide new evidence of his own innocence. The models noted they completely inverted the burden of proof. They demanded a guy sitting in detention prove he didn't do it rather than requiring the state to prove he did.
Which leads us to our final section, Part 5, the AI consensus verdict.
We fed this case into Gemini, ChatGPT, Grok, DeepSeek, Chen, and Copilot. Now, these are entirely different models, built with different training data and analytical frameworks. But guess what? Every single one of them independently reviewed the source documents and came to the exact same unanimous conclusion. They all agreed this verdict was a systemic failure of justice. It's like a giant puzzle, and each AI took a different piece. Gemini drilled into the subjective intent and the physics defense. ChatGPT tore apart that chain of procedural violations. Grok zoomed out to look at the big picture, human rights and civilizational impact. DeepSeek analyzed the tech policy and legal concepts. Chen looked at the evidence gaps, and Copilot maps the whole thing directly to specific statutes.
And despite coming at it from totally different angles, their distinct paths led to a unified consensus, complete lack of substantive evidence, the misuse of objective imputation, guessing his intent based on his degree, the weaponization of a pocket crime to punish simple expression. Ultimately, they concluded this was a severe constitutional infringement that basically criminalized aesthetic expression and academic curiosity.
There's this really profound line from our source material that sums it up perfectly. Law must be believed, otherwise it is useless. Think about that. When the legal system is applied in a way that completely contradicts observable scientific reality and mathematical probability, it chips away at the fundamental belief and trust that makes the law work in the first place.
So, I want to leave you with a thought to chew on today based on the AI's analysis. It highlights that incredibly delicate balance between systematic order, scientific truth, and the precise application of the law. When subjective assumptions completely replace objective evidence, who protects the boundary between lawful expression and systematic overreach? Thanks for joining this explainer, you guys. Keep asking the tough questions, and I'll see you next time.